G'day everyone, we are up to number 4 in my countdown of the top 20 albums, and this is a biggie by one of the best known bands in music history. I'm talking about AC/DC. Which album is it? I've gone for Highway to Hell, which was released about halfway through 1979, and sadly the last album on which Bon Scott sung. He, of course, died in February 1980, replaced by Brian Johnson, who had a very long and distinguished career as the lead singer. Of course, the next album Akadaka would release was the massive Back in Black, still their biggest selling album. I, though, and I like that album, don't get me wrong, I, though, put this one on a higher plane. And in fact, probably would rate Power Age, the previous album to Highway to Hell, ahead of Back in Black. Highway to Hell and Power Age for me are neck and neck. I'd probably just give the points to Highway to Hell, maybe a slightly more commercial sound and a little more polished production. And production is a big factor on this album, I think. Mutt Lange, a very well-known producer, stepped in and recorded this with the band in England after, of course, George Young and Harry Vanda had produced their previous 5 albums to that point. This is a monster of an album. It's funny the way I came to this album, actually. Like a lot of people my age, AC/DC were a very familiar radio staple in the 70s or mid to late 70s. They went overseas, though. They went to the US in 1977 and England. And for whatever reason, they sort of disappeared from the public consciousness, if you like, I think, a bit in this country. And a lot of stuff from the 3 albums that came out in that time wasn't necessarily played that much on radio, which is a real shame, because when I discovered first Let There Be Rock, which came out in 77, Power Age 78, and this album in 79, I didn't discover them till about 10 years later, but wow, they are, by some measure, I think, probably their best albums. This is Akadaka at their finest. Tight, simple riffs, song structures, certainly simple lyrics. In fact, this whole album is either about lust or sex or partying. Pretty predominant themes there, but the definition of a classic rock song, I think, is inherent in most of the tracks on this album. It took me 10 years to really get into this stuff. I remember sitting there one night watching Rage, and they had a feature on Akadaka, and all of a sudden they rattled off. They filmed about 6 clips in a studio for tracks off this album, and it was the first time I'd heard, I think, just about all of them except the title track, Highway to Hell. And I thought, oh, where's this been for the last 10 years? Why didn't I listen to this? Anyway, it's certainly made up for lost time. Starts off with Highway to Hell. Surely everyone knows that track. One of the definitive rock songs, caused a kerfuffle with religious nutters, but it's not really about that at all. It's about life on the road and the difficulty of bands being on the road. The next track, Girls Got Rhythm, faster tempo, good lyrics, good funny lyrics, and a real bouncy sort of feel to it. Next is what I have tied as my best AC/DC song, one of 2 songs, both on this album, Walk All Over You. It's a longer track for them. It's about 5 minutes, starts off quite slowly, builds up, very sparse opening with a drum beat, just Phil Rudd on drums just tapping away there on the snare, and then it sort of explodes into life with a real driving bass line. Cliff Williams, the bass player, really shines on this album, I reckon. And it's a real brooding song, Walk All Over You. Absolutely love it. My other favourite AC/DC song appears later on this album, and it's If You Want Blood, which to me is almost the perfect rock song. That's a faster tempo than Walk All Over You, and great hook, great chorus. The other thing, the production on this album too, I think Mutt Lange got the backing vocals just right too. So the choruses are very singable. You think about Highway to Hell, even the chorus on that, they're all choruses everyone can sing along to, and I think that probably helps or helped make it such a popular record. Other tracks after Walk All Over You, Touch Too Much. Again, one of the things I loved about Bon Scott is his sense of humour. You know, there's a line in Touch Too Much, the face of an angel, a body like Venus with arms. You know, it always makes me laugh. That was released as a single as well. Other favourite tracks on this, Shot Down in Flames, If You Want Blood, and the final track, Night Prowler. That also got him into trouble. There was a serial killer in the US in the mid-'80s that cited that track as his favourite track, and he was a big AC/DC fan, and they sort of appeared in the news connected with that for all the wrong reasons. The other thing about that final track, Night Prowler, it finishes off with Bon, gives you an insight into when it was recorded. The very final words you hear from Bon Scott on record are the sign-off of Robin Williams out of the old TV show Mork and Mindy. At the end of a song, he says, Shazbot Nanu Nanu, which was Mork's sign-off from that sitcom, which certainly gives it an appropriate statement of time, I suppose. And unfortunately, we would hear no more of Bon. But we'd certainly hear a lot more of this album because I think most Acca Dacca fans have this as, if not their favourite album, probably their second favourite album. Certainly mine, never far from the, I was going to say turntable, but never far from the Spotify playlist or iTunes or whatever you use. There's a simplicity about it which you think, oh, it must get stale, but it never does. It's just the, I guess, the interplay between Angus Young's lead guitar, Malcolm Young's incredible sense of rhythm as a rhythm guitarist, which was talked about a lot when he sadly died recently, and the rhythm section with Phil Rudd on drums and Cliff Williams on bass, just really tight. It just all comes together. So it is a triumph of production by Mutt Lang. I think they'd be forever grateful they got him on board. Accessible songs, radio-friendly songs. You know, what a pity it was sort of out of sight, out of mind at that time, and I guess we were still going through the disco obsession in this country. But if you want, good, raw, but still well-produced, clean-sounding, clean in sound, not lyrical, content, it's hard to find a better album than this one. We all know what AC/DC sound like, but the sound on this record never gets stale. I reckon you can put this record on at any time, and if you're not instantly tapping your feet within 5 seconds, you haven't got a pulse. It's a fantastic album. If you've only heard Highway to Hell or one or two tracks, give the whole thing a listen because it's an absolute ripper. And if you like that and you haven't heard Power Age, the previous album, check that out too. That's so close in stature to this one, it's not funny. It's very hard to split the two, but I have gone for this. This is my number 4 album in my top 20 countdown. Highway to Hell by AC/DC. I'll see you back here for number 3.